How we focus. In this particular section, we're going to look at the idea of focusing on a particular activity, where our attention is directed to that activity for a certain period of time. And we'll have a look then about, well, what does that mean? How can we best encourage that? What are some of the consequences if we are focused on one activity for other related activities? So first of all, and this we really have sort of picked up to a degree, our attention, what we focus on at any particular point in time, it's actually quite selective. And if you have somebody who's focusing on an activity, so for example in the image we see here, somebody reading a book, we know that they are likely then to filter out other types of input or other types of stimuli which are not related to it. So it ties into, for example, the idea of the basketball passing with the gorilla walking through the group of people. So that's known as selective attention, focus in other words. And filtering is a good thing because it means then that we can concentrate on the activity we want to do without being disrupted by other things that would break and take our focus away. Given that we are singularly focused, there's one thing we can focus on doing. We know that in terms of trying to attract the person's attention, to break their focus, it really depends upon how strongly focused they are on the activity. If it's something that has engrossed them, that they really are focusing on, they will exclude quite naturally most other stimuli. Conversely, if they're not actually that focused on it, or they've sort of gone into a little bit of mind wandering, it's very easy to attract attention at that particular point. So this is very much situational, depending on what an individual is doing. In terms of sort of broadly, if you use somebody's name, we're normally quite attuned to that, so we pick that up. Or other sort of general messages around food, sex, danger, those sort of things that tie into those primitive aspects. Again, we're tuned in to pick up on those messages quite quickly. So, I mean, if you do need to attract the user's attention, so there's an important reason for that, and you think they may be focused on some other activity, then you'll probably want to use quite a strong, heavy-handed attention-grabbing approach. What's related to that then is that how easy it is to attract somebody's attention actually depends upon if they are expecting to be sort of disrupted. So how often an event is likely to occur, which also then relates to how frequently we expect it to occur, that is really quite an important aspect then of how easy it is for us to become aware of that. To give you an example of this here, this is sort of a few tests done in airports where you can see the image here, sort of an X-ray scan of a rucksack, and you have individuals who are trained then to identify a list of prohibited items inside this. And they've done a number of tests where if you have, for example, a bottle of water, because that's the type of thing they will see day in, day out, people forget to take it out and they'll find it there. They're almost expecting then to see that with a certain frequency, and because there's an expectation, that's very good recognition rate. People will identify these things quite easily. They do occasionally then run security tests on these, where they would put in, for example, something that looks like a gun, and then put that through to see is it is detected. And because that's quite a rare occurrence, doesn't happen that often, it's not the type of thing somebody would see every day or every month, because it's such a low occurrence, people generally don't expect to see it, and it means then there's a higher risk that that will go unnoticed. So how often, and if we are expecting to see something, and how often we expect to see it, these are things that also shape how easy it is for us to divert our attention and to become aware of something. So from the point of view of creating applications, if an event is important, it's an important event, but it's infrequent, it doesn't happen that often, in that particular case, you probably want to consider really heavy-handed attention-grabbing techniques. So important and infrequent, that's going to be challenging in terms of the strength of technique that needs to be used. When a person is focused, so they're focused on a particular task, known as sustained attention on it, optimally, you get about 10 minutes of sustained attention, 10 minutes of focus, and that's in the best case. Assumes that the person finds the topic interesting, is engaged in it, you'll get about 10 minutes of their attention. After that, they will quite often it could be 4, 5, 6 minutes. After that, their attention will wander. So when we talked in the last video about attention wandering, it does happen very naturally, very frequently, and we should expect for that actually to occur. Now, quite often we have a small wander, and then we can come back and we can refocus on activities again. So what that means then from a task design point of view when we're creating our software, if we can try to keep all of our activities to things that can be easily done in 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, don't have things longer than that. If you do have an activity that is longer than that, then expect that the user's attention will be broken as they do that, and make sure you've put in enough other cues and easy things for remembering so the user can quite easily reorientate themselves when they come back to it. Finally, in this section, it's really just to say that we can't multitask. It's not something we can do. We can only consciously focus on one activity. Now, there's a small aside. If there is a sort of a physical activity that we've done that quite a lot, walking, for example, then we can do that whilst also engaging in the mental task. So that's a small example of multitasking. But even in that case, we can't necessarily do them as well. There's an interesting paper that's linked there you may want to have a look at. It's called "Did You See the Unicycling Clown?" So this was getting people who was walking in a park, reading something on a mobile device, and they then had a unicycling clown go past them, and they asked them, well, did you see that? So the fact that people are focusing one activity means they weren't aware of other ones. The underlying activity, in this case walking, we also do that less well if mentally we're focused on another activity. And I'm sure you've all seen those quite humorous videos where somebody accidentally walks into a lamppost or other ones because their focus is directed elsewhere. Now, we can switch our conscious attention between one task and the other. We can do that at a okay frequency in terms of human speed, so that we might get the feeling that we're multitasking. I'm doing this and I'm doing that at the same time and just swapping between them. The reality is it's not really multitasking, it's just switching our attention. And if we do that, we don't do it really efficiently. We're not really set up to be multitasking entities. In our case, it would be better to focus on one, do that, then go on and focus on the next. So from the point of view of us designing software, whilst our software absolutely should make use of multiple cores and do things in the background and do things concurrently, that is not something we should expect or require of our users. We should ask them to focus on one particular task. Ideally get that task done in 5 or 6 minutes. If it takes longer, make sure we're building in ways so that we can reorientate them when they come back after a small mental break. And that's generally how we should approach things. So hopefully of use. The video after this, we're going to go on to thinking about how we are motivated. How do we become motivated? How do we stay motivated around doing different types of activity?